Garden Grove, California, 1987. Police get a very disturbing call. A landlord says he's found his tenant, Shannon Lloyd, lying face down in his bed. Shannon, a 23-year-old single mom.
The officers arrived at the scene. They did discover that she was nude and had possibly been sexually assaulted.
Investigators run out of leads. The case goes cold. 2 years later, another murder discovered on a nearby rural road. The victim, 27-year-old Renee Cuevas.
They noticed what they believed to be a mannequin on the side of the road. So when they went to go investigate, they realized it was a human body. She was completely nude, and she had a ligature around her neck.
Investigators have no idea if these savage crimes are linked. Is there a serial rapist and killer on the loose in California?
It was like surreal, just like a flip of a switch. He was a monster.
This is the story of a 35-year search for the killer of two innocent young women. I'm Nancy Grace. Welcome to Bloodline Detectives. Garden Grove, California, 1987. It's a small, prosperous city in Orange County, just south of LA. The crime rate in Garden Grove and nearby communities is soaring in the 1980s. By 1987, Shannon Lloyd is living there, a young single mom with a little boy.
Shannon, 23 years old, considered a lovely young lady.
She had some encounters with law enforcement, but she was a loved daughter, a loved sister, and a loved mother.
On May 21, 1987, Shannon Lloyd's landlord comes home from work, finds his bedroom door locked from the inside.
And the bedroom door to his bedroom was locked, and he went to get a key to unlock the door, and he discovered Shannon in his bed. He went to call the police because it was obvious that she was dead.
The officers arrived at the scene and they discovered her body. She was on the bed face down with the covers pulled up to her neck. Upon further inspection, that they did discover that she was nude and had possibly been sexually assaulted.
Officers arrived on scene and detectives were called in to assist with the investigation. One of the detectives was Detective Ron Shave and other Garden Grove personnel who have since retired.
Inside, detectives find a gruesome murder scene. It looks like the victim had no chance of escape.
She had been strangled with a pair of pajamas, and the pajamas were still tied tightly around her neck. And the homeowner untied it thinking that she was possibly alive still. She wasn't. He noticed that she had rigor set in, and that's when he went to call for help.
So at the time in the late 80s, there was not a lot of technology and leads as far as that goes, but they were able to canvassed the area, they preserved the scene and collected all the physical evidence and any kind of forensic evidence they were able to collect and preserve. They canvassed the area, interviewed neighbors, family members, and whoever they could in regards to what had occurred to try to learn what happened to Shannon. And that was the evidence that they were able to work on.
Detectives chase every lead. They quickly come up with a clear picture of Shannon Lloyd's final day.
She had a friend who had been at the house with her prior to the two of them going out to Harbor Boulevard to work. They took the homeowner's car to get around.
That car was found at Harbor and Garden Grove Boulevard by an officer by the name of Rob Mathis. And then the actual assigned detective turned out to be my future partner in Homicide, Ron Shave, and he is one of the best homicide investigators I've ever worked with.
Detective Ron Shave and his team begin working the case. Their first suspect is the person who reports the murder, Shannon's landlord. His alibi is solid. He's quickly eliminated as a POI, person of interest.
We were able to eliminate him quickly. He had witnesses at work, and the time of death made it impossible for him to have been the killer.
Shannon Lloyd's murder goes cold. Then, 2 years later, there's a murder of another young woman, also in Orange County. Are the two murders connected? We find out next on Bloodline Detectives. 1987, Garden Grove, Orange County, California. Police investigating the murder of Shannon Lloyd, a 23-year-old single mom. Her brutalized body discovered by her landlord there at the apartment where Shannon lives. Detectives work the case, but there's certainly no quick breakthrough.
They did a phenomenal job. They had a sexual assault kit. They had fingerprints. They had bedding. There was what they believed at the time to be a used condom, the condom wrapper, clothing, cigarette butts, some used, some partially used. There was a Vaseline jar and some other items of clothing that were collected.
The protocols would be that you want to freeze the scene. You want to document it through charts and photographs, and then collect the items of evidence individually. You're looking for witnesses, you're looking for suspects.
We thought that our techniques were pretty state-of-the-art. We had techniques to identify fibers and a whole science of fiber identification. The blood work that we could do at the time would help us eliminate a lot of suspects just by being a secretor or not, and blood type could be obtained from that. At that time, I had no idea that just a few years down the road we'd have DNA evidence available.
In 1987, forensic science is in its infancy. 21st century DNA investigative techniques are still years away, so Garden Grove police rely on old school police methods.
We had investigators canvassing the area, hoping to see somebody come or go from the home or a car to come or go from the home, but we had nothing. Back then, we didn't have Ring cameras. We didn't have video surveillance on homes like we do today. So everything had to be eyewitness testimony. We didn't have anything that could capture video evidence.
The investigation goes nowhere. Investigators hope an autopsy of Shannon's body will reveal important clues.
Blood and tissue samples are taken at autopsy and tested for drugs and alcohol, and a rape kit was collected at autopsy.
It was revealed that Shannon had passed from strangulation. At the time that they did discover the body, she had a piece of cloth tied around her neck, so that is likely what was used.
The evidence from the autopsy is useful, but it's not enough to advance the investigation. Months pass, and one by one, the leads dry up.
When detectives exhaust all those possible leads and there's no other further leads to go on, a case unfortunately goes cold. They hold on to the case, hoping that either someone comes forward or new technology becomes available where then they could reopen those cases. So it's very important for detectives and police departments to make sure that those cases are never forgotten.
And that's what happens in Shannon Lloyd's case. Her murder is not forgotten. 2 years later, another young woman found dead there in Orange County. Her body discovered by 3 men near the El Toro Marine Base, just 15 short miles north of Garden Grove.
They noticed what they believed to be a mannequin on the side of the road. So when they went to go investigate, they realized it was a human body. She was completely nude, and she had a ligature around her neck.
Orange County sheriffs identify the victim as another single mom, 27-year-old Renee Cuevas.
She had a similar lifestyle to Shannon, and she was also very loved by her family.
She was also sexually assaulted, and the cause of death was strangulation.
The rural crime scene where Renee Cuevas is found does not provide police with very many clues.
There were two individuals that they had suspected that Renee had been associating with at the time, and those two individuals, they had a criminal history, but none of those leads panned out. There was no concrete evidence to tie those individuals to Renee's homicide.
Investigators now have two murders, both of young women, both women sex assaulted, both single moms, and both killed just 15 short miles apart. Is that a coincidence? The evidence available yields nothing else to link the two cases.
Once they kind of identified those individuals who were the primary persons of interest at the time, and they couldn't make any concrete connections, and there was no additional physical evidence, then that's kind of when the case went cold.
Years pass, both murders go cold, but there's still active investigations. DNA technology is advancing, and the National DNA Database, CODIS, is created. Police revisit the two cases, hoping DNA from the crime scenes might match an existing person from a different crime.
So in July of 1997, a suspect DNA profile was obtained in the Renee Cuevas case by the Orange County Crime Lab. And that came from evidence both at the scene and from her body. And at that time, it was uploaded into CODIS and had no hits.
CODIS is the combined DNA index system that is operated by the FBI in the United States. It is a network of local, state, and national DNA databases consisting of convicted offender DNA profiles, arrestee DNA profiles, and profiles from crime scene evidence, which are known as forensic unknowns. The CODIS database at the national level, which is known as NDIS, is over 20 million profiles. In California, the state database known as the CalDOJ ESDIS is over 3 million profiles.
The advancements of DNA really started in the early 90s. There was a case handled by the Orange County Sheriff's Renee Cuevas, and they developed a genetic male profile from that investigation. Fast forward a few years, in 2002, we developed a genetic male profile on our case. So from that point, they had uploaded that DNA into CODIS.
The CODIS results yield both good and bad news for investigators. The unknown male DNA from the murders is a match. Shannon Lloyd and Renee Cuevas are victims of the same sadistic killer. The bad news? The DNA does not match any offenders in the CODIS database.
We were excited because that meant we had more parameters that we could compare to determine, just based on who was in those vicinities at the time, would help us focus. And at that time, Garden Grove had really put a lot of effort. They had some retired investigators come back to work for them, and they were trying to follow up on what leads that they had and maybe identify other cases by MO that they could request DNA samples on. So there was a lot of work going on behind the scenes that required step-by-step, time-consuming efforts that don't necessarily lead anywhere until you get that magic hit.
Investigators from Garden Grove and the Orange County Sheriffs now know they're looking for one man responsible for two murders. And they've got his DNA profile, but can they get his name? That's next on Bloodline Detectives. Orange County, California. Two murders, 2 years apart, one suspect. The first murder in 1987 is when Shannon Lloyd, a single mom in her early 20s, found dead in her apartment. Then another young woman found dead in 1989, Renee Cuevas, also a young single mom. DNA proves the killer is the same man. But now, police need a name. They need to identify him.
I was reassigned to Homicide. I had worked domestic violence prior to that. And in 2018, I received a phone call from Shannon's brother, Tom. And boy, did I get an earful. And he was not happy. He consistently called for updates. By the time that I intercepted the call, he was frustrated. Understandably so. He wanted answers. His mom had passed away, and she wasn't able to get that closure that she needed at the time of her death. His emotions were also really heightened. So I had this conversation with him, and I just listened to him. And I didn't know much about the case at that time. So after that phone conversation, I thought about it a lot, and it stuck with me. And I said, well, in order for me to really have a good understanding, I am going to have to learn this case like the back of my hand. And that's what prompted me to pull the case, to see everything that we had and what more we could do. And that's when I learned the details of the investigation.
She really wanted this to be solved for the family, and she really kept it alive. I don't want to say it was ever truly closed, but her interest is the reason that it got to the point of IGG consideration.
IGG, or investigative genetic genealogy, is a forensic tool that delivers incredible results in cases that seem impossible to crack.
When I was with the Orange County Homicide Task Force, they came out with a list of people that had DNA but no hits in the CODIS database. Even though there was not a match in the database, it matched the two crime scenes together. So that was kind of a higher profile case because we knew at the time that he had been responsible for at least 2 murders.
Detective Tara Ramirez determined to find this brutal killer.
After my initial phone conversation with Tom, we stayed in constant contact. I told him, I said, I read your sister's case. I'm moving forward with this. I will not retire until we solve this, which is a big promise to make. And it was a heavy promise because I did a lot of praying, hoping that the right answers would fall into my lap. It just reminded me of the purpose. And you realize that these families' victims, you're their lifeline. Something that they dwell on day in and day out. They don't have other cases. They don't have other distractions. This was the most horrific thing to happen in their life, and you were their only lifeline to give them the answer that they're searching for.
When studying the case files, Detective Ramirez struck by the level of detail passed on by the original investigative team.
Detective Shave did such an incredible job with his investigation. I was hoping that maybe they missed something, or they had overlooked, or there was still a potential witness or somebody that I could get that would generate a new lead for us. They covered everything.
Maybe the most important thing the original investigative team does is that they save crucial evidence like DNA samples that can be analyzed when forensic science techniques improve. In 2018, the notorious Golden State Killer murders in California are solved by a team using investigative genetic genealogy. Could this technique also provide a breakthrough for the 2 Orange County murders?
The big takeaway for me is that the traditional law enforcement CODIS database is completely different from investigative genetic genealogy DNA. You're talking apples and oranges, and you can't use one for the other. It's a completely different process. But investigative genetic genealogy uses familial relationships to identify unknown individuals, is the end goal. But based on the number of DNA segments and the length of DNA, the more of those segments that match, the closer related you are.
I thought, well, why can't we do that with ours? Maybe that's our answer. Maybe that'll be something that we can use. And that's where I started doing my research. But at that time, it was so new. It wasn't familiar. No one really knew what to do with that. I contacted an independent lab company, and they seemed promising. And I thought, this is gonna work. We're gonna get our answer. However, when I got the letter, I noticed in fine print that they were going to retain all evidence. Again, this was new to me, so I'm learning as I'm going through this, and I reached out to our crime lab. The question was, if we use all this DNA and it doesn't work out, I've now exhausted all the evidence that we have, because the Orange County Sheriff's Department, the Renee Cuevas case, they didn't have any usable DNA or evidence to use. It was only in our Shannon Lloyd case.
The stakes could not be higher. Detective Ramirez must decide whether to gamble on using the last bit of DNA evidence for one final test.
Because I had such a good relationship with Tom, I called him and I said, Tom, look, this is my predicament. This is the situation I'm in. And ultimately he said, Tara, I trust what you decide to do. And if we need to wait, we wait. I sat on it, and it just, you get a gut feeling sometimes. And I said, it's as much as I want this answer now, it's not the right time, and this isn't the right thing to do. So you fast forward to 3 years, the advancement in the genetic genealogy skyrocketed, and it became more and more advanced, and people were more familiar with what to do with it. And then that's when I reached out to the Orange County Crime Lab, the Investigative Genetic Genealogy Unit, and that's where I came into contact with Dave Dierking. And then the forensic scientist, Anna, I had heard wonderful things about her, and we came up with a plan.
The plan is to extract an uncontaminated DNA sample from the crime scene, and this proves far more difficult than first thought.
I did some research to figure out if SNP testing could be done for this case, and if possible, what lab would be the best choice to do this testing as to not compromise that limited evidence that we had remaining.
A SNP profile is a profile that allows you to look at over 400,000 points of identification, and it's compared in public databases to other SNP profiles and allows distantly related persons to be known as far as on a match list. And from match lists that you get, you can put together family trees and hopefully come to an area where you believe that you have an investigative lead that would lead to the identity of either the suspect or the missing person.
SNP testing for IgG is still a fairly new technology, and it's constantly evolving. At the start of IgG with the Golden State Killer case, only single source DNA samples were used for IgG testing. However, this testing has continued to evolve. At this point, the testing had evolved, and the challenging sample for the Lloyd case was able to be tested for IgG. So the sample was sent for SNP testing. And in March of 2022, we obtained match list results from both GEDmatch and family tree DNA.
It's now been over 30 years since the brutal murders of Shannon Lloyd and Renee Cuevas, and at last, the net seems to be closing in on the killer.
When we first obtained these match lists, I analyzed the DNA to identify the top matches, establish if there's any genetic networks of relatives within the match list that are related to each other, and to see if there's any other DNA-related information that can help in our family tree building process. We had a number of matches, with our highest match being in the second cousin range, and a number of other matches in the second cousin to third cousin range.
As we were building these trees, what we were looking for was someone that would be in the age range that we predicted the suspect would have at the time of the crime, and who would have connections to the Orange County area. So on March 23rd, 2022, she came across a gentleman, that's a loose term, named Ruben Jack Wilson Smith. He was of the right age frame. He also had an Orange County address, and when you looked at that address, he lived 8 miles from where Shannon Lloyd was murdered and approximately 11 miles from where Renee Cuevas' body was located.
A 30-year investigation may be coming to an end. Police have a suspect in the savage murders of 2 young moms. His name, Ruben Smith. Who is Ruben Smith and where is he? We find out next on Bloodline Detectives. Garden Grove, California, 2022. Detectives closing in on a prime suspect in the homicides of not one, but two single moms in the 80s. 2003, the cases are linked by DNA. It proves the same man killed both women. It takes over 2 decades and remarkable advances in investigative genetic genealogy to finally deliver the name of a prime suspect. Who is he? Ruben Smith.
He was born in Michigan. He did live in the Orange County area in the 1980s and then later moved to Las Vegas, Nevada in the 90s. He was in the military for a short period of time.
We did some criminal history indexes in California and did not find anything. So an inquiry was made regarding contacts with law enforcement in Nevada, and we learned that in 1998 he was arrested for attempted murder and sexual assault. And after obtaining that report, it was clear that he seemed to be what we would expect the suspect in those 2 other murders to be.
Garden Grove Police and Orange County Sheriffs uncover more about Ruben Smith's background. They discover a brutal sex assault charge in Vegas.
It was late 1998 where we found that he had been arrested for a sexual assault and an attempted murder of a female while she was still alive. And so we dug into that just to see what the circumstances were, and the hairs on your neck stood up because I was like, this is Shannon Lloyd. This is a survivor of what Shannon Lloyd, I imagine, went through, because the details were so similar. And in my gut, I knew that this was going to be the right guy, but again, we still had to move forward.
The attack where he was arrested occurred on July 30th, 1998, and it involved a woman who accepted a ride from Ruben. And she was a pretty streetwise person, and she got into that car willingly. And it was obvious that once she was in that car that he had a plan for her. He drove her where he wanted to drive her. He tried to kill her while sexually assaulting her. And she's a true hero for being able to break loose and to flee and to actually report the crime in which he got arrested for.
When I first met him, he was very nice. He was very charming, and so I got in the car with him. I felt safe with him. And as we were driving, he kept telling me he had to make one stop to a storage unit. And when he pulled onto the street, I knew right then something was wrong. I go out of the car. Somehow we got outside, and he grabbed me by the back of my hair. And when he smashed my head up against the brick wall, I knew I was gonna die. I knew it. It's the evil in him, the feelings he generated off his body. I knew if I didn't fight, I was gonna die. It was like surreal, you know. The man was so nice and so friendly, and then just like a flip of a switch, he was a monster.
She ultimately is like the hero in all this, because without her statement and without her will to survive, we wouldn't be here today, because she ultimately was who exposed Ruben Smith to the horrific crimes that he was doing to these women.
Because of his arrest, a bloodstained card was retained, even though the case was not prosecuted and other evidence had been destroyed. The Las Vegas Metro Police Department still had that bloodstained card from him.
Thanks to the Las Vegas survivor, police have a clear picture of the pattern of Ruben Smith's attacks on women. But now they've got to be certain the DNA blood sample taken by Vegas cops matches the DNA from the murders of Shannon Lloyd and Renee Cuevas. Sounds routine, right? But of course, there's a hitch.
He was married. He had an older son, and living in Las Vegas, he had been arrested for another sex crime. He knew that he was going to be going to trial. He obviously was aware that there's DNA evidence nowadays, so his fear must have been lingering, and maybe even a guilty conscience. Either that or he's afraid of going to prison. But he killed himself in front of his wife and son. Maybe represented guilt, I don't know. We don't understand a lot, even today, what goes on in the mind of an offender like that. There are people I've come across that are no doubt just evil, and there are others who are driven by their own phantoms that haunt them.
Ruben Smith's suicide makes it so much harder to tie him to the two victims in Orange County. But still, police have that crucial blood sample taken from the Vegas attack in 1988.
Now, we were aware that he had committed suicide at this stage, and he had been cremated. We were able to secure a portion of that bloodstain card, and the Orange County Crime Lab was able to develop a profile which matched the suspect profile in both the Shannon Lloyd and Renee Cuevas's suspect. That crime that he committed in Vegas mirrored exactly what the belief was, that both Shannon and Renee willingly got into a car with him, and yet he had a plan to kill and sexually assault them.
Over 30 years later, two devastated families and 3 law enforcement agencies in Orange County finally have answers.
I was told by Detective Ramirez that they found out who the true killer was to these cases, and I was extremely happy, not only for the present detectives, but also the past detectives that had worked so hard on this case, the forensic scientists, all the crime scene investigators. For all 3 agencies, it was very, very joyful day when we found out who the killer was, and also for the victims' families.
The first family member Detective Ramirez tells is Shannon Lloyd's brother, Tom.
So closure for you would be?
Find out who did it.
What if I tell you we have that answer for you?
No way.
We do, Tom.
All right.
I know that you've been wrestling with this for many, many years, and we have a name, we have a person that is responsible for your sister's death. His name is Ruben Smith, and I can show you a picture of him if you'd like.
I would love to see it. I've never seen
So what I can say is it doesn't look like there's any connection. There was any prior connection to him knowing Shannon prior to the night that they met. But yeah, by all means, I will show you.
Piece of garbage. I have no sympathy for him at all.
The circumstances are terrible, but to be able to give this closure and this relief of someone who's waited almost 30 years, and deep down inside he thought it would never get solved. It, to me, there's no better feeling, and it's the driving purpose of the sacrifices that you make as a detective. It's something that you don't understand unless you're in Tom's shoes. And you don't understand really how much you are their lifeline. And that's pretty powerful.
Ruben Smith may be dead, but it does not deny 2 families and law enforcement answers they've wanted for 35 years. That's next on Bloodline Detectives. Orange County, California, July 2022. Police, prosecutors, victims' families deliver an emotional news conference to announce the murders of Shannon Lloyd and Renee Cuevas are finally solved.
Today is a good day. I will not speak about the individual whom took the life of my cousin Renee, but rather share her life with you. Renee was loved by our grandma Mercedes. Renee had brothers, Michael, Callie, and Victor. She also had a sister named Raylene. She was surrounded by family who loved her. Renee had a son named Louis Ramirez. He resembles her plenty. He was her pride and joy. Renee was the kind of mom that gave her son the unconditional love that only she can give him. If I could speak with my cousin again, I would tell her how sorry I am. I would make her laugh so I can see her beautiful dimples. Someday I will get a chance again to hug you and to tell you I love you. Save a place for me in heaven.
It's always good to give some sense of justice to the family. Obviously, it's not going to bring their loved one back, but to know that the person who was responsible for this has been held accountable. Unfortunately, he was deceased at the time, so there was no prosecution, but it gives the family some closure to know that, number one, we still look after these loved ones' cases after so long, and number two, that they were able to identify a suspect.
It had been a long time since I'd seen anybody related to the family, and that's moving when you see their response. I can't imagine waiting. I'm sorry. I can't imagine waiting that long to find out.
We would have loved to be able to actually apprehend Ruben Smith and bring him to justice, but sometimes it doesn't work that way. But that's okay. We still found out who he is, what he did, and we know the truth.
The team that finally solves the case pays tribute to detectives who preceded them and the incredible science of investigative genetic genealogy.
This was the key to solving the puzzle because that name wasn't on anybody's radar whatsoever.
I don't think it would have been solved without IGG. You had a person that had committed suicide, and he knew what the monster he was. And I think he also realized DNA was on its way, and it was becoming known that crimes were being solved.
To see how powerful DNA could be in a case such as the Shannon Lloyd and Renee Cuevas cases was incredible. They were tested multiple times using DNA, and then in the end, the newest DNA technology, which is IgG, was able to put closure on both cases. That's why I think it's still important to test DNA from old cases, an old sexual assault kit with the newest DNA technology, because you never know what other cases that it may link to.
I'm just really happy that we were able to bring closure to the victims' families and that we have detectives from all over, not only California, Orange County, that are continuously working these cases. And sometimes we may not have the answers at that time. Sometimes we may not have the resources readily available, but we do have a lot of men and women that are working hard and never quitting to solve these crimes.
I'm grateful that Garden Grove PD is putting such an effort into cold cases. The transition that I saw from a little farming community to what it is today was rewarding, but I really can't even imagine what the coming days are going to look like with artificial intelligence or new DNA technology or face recognition, things that I never dreamt of as an investigator.
Investigative genetic genealogy is no longer the future when it comes to catching vicious criminals. It's the here and now, it's the present, and it is mind-boggling to think what forensic science will evolve into in the future.
The more that these types of cases are revealing themselves and they're being solved, it's letting these suspects know that whether it was a year, whether it's been 20 years, that at some point it will catch up, and it is going to catch up. And I look at the advancements from just the 90s to now, I can only imagine what's going to be in 20 years. I think that if you are doing wrong, this is definitely a testament to the advancements, and their time will come.
For someone that's committed a crime and left DNA, your day will come, and it's coming soon.
Shannon Lloyd and Renee Cuevas, both young, beautiful, loving, single mothers, had their entire lives ahead of them when they were savagely, brutally murdered. The determination of 3 generations of detectives, plus incredible forensic science, at least now provides answers to loved ones left behind. I'm Nancy Grace. Thank you for being with us here at Bloodline Detectives.